The date was February 22nd, 1943. Hans Scholl and his sister Sophie, along with their best friend Christoph Prost, were scheduled to be executed by Nazi officials that afternoon. The prison guards were so impressed with the calm and bravery of the prisoners in the face of impending death that they violated regulations by permitting them to meet together one last time. Hans, a medical student at the University of Munich, was 24. Sophie, a student, was 21. Christoph, a medical student, was 22. This is the story of the White Rose. It is a lesson in dissent. It is a tale of courage, of principle, of honor. One day in 1942, copies of a leaflet entitled The White Rose suddenly appeared at the University of Munich. The leaflet contained an anonymous essay that said that the Nazi system had slowly imprisoned the German people and was now destroying them. The Nazi regime had turned evil. It was time, the essay said, for Germans to rise up and resist the tyranny of their own government. At the bottom of the essay, the following request appeared. Please make as many copies of this leaflet as you can and distribute them. The members of the White Rose had to act cautiously. The Nazi regime maintained an iron grip over German society. Internal dissent was quickly and efficiently smashed by the Gestapo. Hans and Sophie Scholl and their friends knew what would happen to them if they were caught. People began receiving copies of the leaflets in the mail. Students at the University of Hamburg began copying and distributing them. Copies began turning up in different parts of Germany and Austria. Moreover, as Hanser points out, the members of the White Rose did not limit themselves to the leaflets. Graffiti began appearing in large letters on streets and buildings all over Munich. Down with Hitler, Hitler the mass murderer, and freedom, freedom. The Gestapo was driven into a frenzy. It knew that the authors were having to procure large quantities of paper, envelopes, and postage. It knew that they were using a duplicating machine, but despite the Gestapo's best efforts, it was unable to catch the perpetrators. One day, the group's luck had ran out. They were caught leaving pamphlets at the University of Munich and were arrested on February 18, 1943. The three of them were indicted for treason. On February 22nd, 4 days after their arrest, their trial began. The proceeding judge, Roland Freisler, Chief Justice of the People's Court of the Greater German Reich, had been sent from Berlin. Hanser writes, he conducted the trial as if the future of the Reich were indeed at stake. He roared denunciations of the accused as if he were not the judge but the prosecutor. He behaved alternately like an actor ranting through an overridden role in an implausible melodrama, and the Grand Inquisitor calling down eternal damnation on the heads of the three irredeemable heretics before him. No witnesses were called, since the defendants had admitted everything. The proceedings consisted almost entirely of Roland Freisler's denunciation and abuse, punctuated from time to time by half-hearted offerings from the court-appointed defense attorneys, one of whom summed up his case with the observation, I can only say flat justitia, let justice be done, by which he meant, let the accused get what they deserve. Sophie Scholl shocked everyone in the courtroom when she remarked to Freisler, somebody after all had to make a start. What we wrote and said is also believed by many others. They just don't dare to express themselves as we did. Later in the proceedings, she said to him, you know the war is lost. Why don't you have the courage to face it? Robert Freisler pronounced his judgment on the three defendants, guilty of treason. Their sentence, death. That afternoon, the prison guards permitted Hans, Sophie, and Christoph to have one last visit together. Sophie was then led to the guillotine. One observer described her as she walked to her death, without turning a hair, without flinching. Christoph was next. Hans Scholl was last. Just before he was beheaded, Hans cried out, "Long live freedom." Unfortunately, they were not the last to die. The Gestapo's investigation was relentless. Later tried and executed were Alex Schmorl, Willy Graf, and Kurt Huber. Students at the University of Hamburg were either executed or sent to concentration camps. Today, every German knows the story of the White Rose, A square in the University of Munich is named after Hans and Sophie, and there are streets, squares, and schools all over Germany named for the members of the White Rose.